Are you ready to lose $1,000,000? Yeah, I'm talking to you. You're on the video because you're interested in how you can avoid this, but let me tell you how you walk right into $1,000,000 loss. If you mess up on financial due diligence, you will be in the poorhouse. You will be bankrupt. You will lose $1,000,000. And so, what I'm going to tell you is the three things that your quality of earnings process, provider, however you want to couch it, must have and must do to keep you away from losing $1,000,000. And there's three things, and I'm going to break them down. Keep a high level, keep a high energy. So the first one is they got to get the gosh darn data. Second, they have to do the proper analysis for a company of the industry and the size that you're actually trying to transact on. And third, most of my clients need decision support, meaning you get this 30-page quality of earnings, 20-page quality of earnings that has all these things that are different than what the confidential information memorandum said. What the heck do you do about it? Does this 30-page report say throw the deal out and leave it on the side of the road? Does it say go close this deal tomorrow, forget the legal docs, just give the dude the money? Does it say, hey, you should probably reduce price by 20%? And what I'll tell you is that there's no part of the quality of earnings that makes any recommendations, and that's on purpose. So if you don't have decision support associated with your report, you may actually get the first two right, mess up the third, and lose $1,000,000. So let's talk about it. All right. So you think on $1,000,000 deal that any seller would just be open kimono to try to hurry up and get their cash? Not. These owners have never had to show anybody information. This information is highly confidential. And if you are nefarious and go share it with their competitor or work for their competitor, how would they know? They're going to be in deep trouble. They don't have the infrastructure. That's why you're buying it. But now you're asking them to do extra work on top of running the business. So they don't have the time for it. Oftentimes they don't know who's the person in their organization or the advisor that actually has the information that you need. So let me tell you how beginners in the QOE game do it. So here's my list. I'm going to send it to the seller and the broker, and the data is going to miraculously show up. Anybody who's been in due diligence knows that's a crock. Now, what happens is a lot of people 3 days later, here's the list again. Why didn't you fill it out? Why isn't it done? And they do that every 3 or 4 days, and you get nothing. Also, people don't even split their list up into what questions are the seller going to be able to answer versus their bookkeeper versus their CPA versus their head of sales. So that never gets bifurcated. So you're asking the seller questions they can't answer, but they're not going to tell you they can't answer something about their business. So then you put 2 to 3 extra weeks of time in your deal just because you're not smart enough to tell the seller or the broker that this is probably a question for the CPA or the head of sales. Even worse, back in my private equity days, we had 4, 6, 8-page due diligence lists that were sent around. And I still see those in small deals. And I'm going to tell you what a seller thinks when he sees that. This buyer is crazy. They're out of control. I'm going to sit on my hands until they give up on some of the data in this list. And so what you don't recognize is the fact that the seller is not giving you data just to spite you, to make you have a smaller list. All of this stuff, what it does is it takes a process that we get done in a week to 4 weeks. So now what happens is the seller is 4 weeks more frustrated with you because it took you longer to get through this and you didn't add any value to your process. So success in this is having a very robust but finite item list. Our list is 40 items, and I put it up against anybody's list, and I promise you we do more detail than most folks. But these 4 or 5-page lists are hogwash. Nobody's gone to summarize things. The second thing is you have to communicate. You cannot just send over these lists and do it in email and do it 5 times and think, oh wait, the 6th time they're definitely going to do it now because I said it's important. No, get somebody on a call. People do not like being on calls where they haven't done their work. So hey, let's set up a call in 3 days and talk through the items in case you don't understand any. But what that really means is, hey, get this done. You're going to look really silly on the call. So you got to learn how to communicate. The other thing, you got to learn how to use the broker. And I'm not going to get into that here. We talk about that in my class. But a big piece of that is that person that you might not like all that much. This is one time when you can push them to do something that you won't be able to do yourself. The other piece about getting the data is recognizing when you have to make an assumption around data that's close and that's good enough. I use the example of an asset list, which is one of the items on my 40-item list. And the asset list, think of a trucking company. They got 40 trucks, 50 trailers, whole bunch of equipment to fix stuff, boom. So you want a fixed asset list. Well, they're like, we don't really record that anywhere. We don't have a fixed asset list. I don't know what to do here, Elliott. And the response from me is always, well, so if I walked on your yard and stole 2 of your trucks, then nobody would know. Oh, no, man. John works the yard. You'd never be able to get on that yard with John and steal anything. Well, John has the list. You got to get John on the phone, use his brain to talk through all the items. It's not inside of QuickBooks, but if John's the guy that would know, John's the guy you need to talk to. And this is all getting the data. This isn't doing this is getting the data. But I'll tell you, I hear about processes that take 6, 8, 10 weeks to get the data. And all that does is take your 90-day process and add a month or two to it. And I'm going to tell you, after 90 days, that seller is going to want to punch you in the face and kick you out of the process. So what happens is you don't realize that extra 8 weeks that at the beginning, you're like, okay, it's like when you get a big lotto check, the first $100,000, you don't think about spending it. That last $100,000 is important though. When you get to day 80 and you took those 5-6 weeks to get the data, I promise you the intense pressure that will be put on you for no reason will mess your deal up. You will have to negotiate from a place of weakness because you wasted time. And the thing is, the seller will never say, hey, you know what, buyer, it was my fault for taking 5 weeks to get that data. I'll just add 5 weeks to the 90 days. Never. So it's your responsibility to get it done, but you haven't done a deal before. So your provider of quality of earnings needs to know how to get this done for you. And a lot of people don't know how to do anything more cunning than sending a list in email. You got to get somebody who can do something better than that. The second way not to lose $1 million. Make sure your quality of earnings is actually doing the financial diligence work sufficient to understand what the financials of the business actually are, which is the biggest piece of this. Well, Elliott, obviously everybody has scope that says they do the work. Let me just keep it real. If you know me at all, you know how long I've been in this and you know how much research I do. So you should know I know what my competitors do and what they don't. Let me talk about some things that people do and charge you for that has nothing to do with financial diligence and will easily set you up to lose $1 million. First off, these 3-page quality of earnings, they're putting you in more danger than doing nothing because you have false security that you actually looked at something. Let me tell you what they're doing. They're just restating QuickBooks. They're taking QuickBooks into their accounting system, pushing QuickBooks out. They're asking 3 to 5 to 6 questions because they know that you don't want a whole bunch of questions asked to your seller and they don't want to spend a bunch of time. They push out the report. It's got their brand name on it. Their brand is out there and people haven't figured out that they're fleecing people. And now you have a false positive on some analysis. Think about going to war with a bulletproof vest that doesn't work and somebody starts shooting. Is that when you want to figure that out? Or maybe do some research at the front end to figure out which bulletproof vest actually stops bullets. Let me tell you the second thing people do. You cannot believe small company financials at all. That does not mean 100% of them are nefarious and trying to fool you, but I say it all the time. On a $100 million deal, I can tell you that a company reports in either cash basis or accrual basis. I do 50 deals a year and I have been for 5 years. Let me tell you, each and every one was either cash-ish or accrual-ish, meaning they don't report in either one specifically. And so what a lot of quality of earnings providers do is they do the restating of the QuickBooks, they reconcile it to the taxes, and they tell you that they're done because that's the main analysis. And if you're a first-time person, you wouldn't know any better. But hold on. You can manipulate QuickBooks. I can go into mine right now and manipulate it. You can manipulate taxes. That's why people have good tax preparers and bad ones, because they actually interpret taxes differently. What is the data source that you actually can believe? TikTok, the bank. JP Morgan Chase will not allow you to walk into the bank with $1,000, but say, hey, when these buyers show up, tell them it's $10,000, okay? Wink, wink. They won't do it. So the conservatism of the bank gives you a data platform to build from, and the analysis that needs to be done is a proof of cash. And it should be done on a monthly basis and summarized annually. And when I tell you that most of my competitors don't do that, they're missing the whole point. Because if you can't trace cash into a bank, out of a bank, you can't tell me that it actually occurred. Because you can make anything up in QuickBooks, it's computer keystrokes, and you can tell the tax man whatever you want, even overstating profit, because some sucker buyer is going to come by and say that's sufficient. And you know that some SBA lender is going to take taxes as the main data source for them, and they're going to put you in the poor house. $1 million loss. So make sure your provider is actually doing diligence work, doing work sufficient to actually understand what the financials of the company actually look like. And I gave a couple of examples of stuff I've seen. It worries me to my core because I know people are paying real money for these things, $5, $10, $20,000, and all they're doing is restating QuickBooks. Make sure your provider's doing the work. People mess up on the first two things and lose $1 million all the time. But the third one is one that's not obvious, but is mission critical. So let me talk about it. It's decision support once the quality of earnings is delivered. Fancy words. Here's what it is. 85% of my clients have never looked at a quality of earnings, have never looked at a P&L for more than 10 minutes, wouldn't know cash basis versus accrual. And frankly, I'm not even sure they all read my report. Doesn't make me sad, not one bit. Here's why. My report does the work that it needs to do. So let me tell you how it should work, but then let me tell you how it's working in a lot of these instances. In fact, I'm going to flip that. In most of these instances, somebody delivers a report. Here's your report. And you're looking at, you're flipping through, okay, you'll understand EBITDA, but you won't understand the adjustments or why they're different than what the broker said. You'll understand the executive summary points if they even do executive summaries, which is crazy to me. But you won't understand anything besides the headline, what's in bold. You won't understand the 2 or 3 sentences below it. You won't understand the risk section. So every accountant is going to tell you, here's what we did, here's what we couldn't do, and here are the risks that are associated with the stuff we couldn't do. You're going to read those risks, and it's going to be in accounting language, which is going to be as dense as legal language, and you're not going to understand it. And then you're going to ask your accountant, the person who did the quality of earnings, hey, can you explain these 3 bullet points to me? And 45 minutes later, they're still not done explaining it because they're talking in accounting language, which you don't understand. But that's what you paid for, right? You paid for an accountant that speaks in a language you don't understand to do a report for you to subsequently bet $1 million, personally guaranteed, as a result of it. So that's what's happening in a lot of these instances. The quality of earnings report is to help you make a decision. And actually, let's be more specific, a singular decision to buy the business you're looking at or to not buy the business you're looking at. Okay? When this report doesn't give you what you need to make a decision, you wasted your time and money. The accountant got paid. The broker is happy that it's done. The seller doesn't want any more financial questions, and you got a report you don't understand. Let me tell you how you can get the support that you need. When your quality of earnings provider understands what the actual purpose of the tool is, then what they're doing for you is they're saying, hey, this is what these risks mean in layman's terms, like they were speaking to a high schooler. Not because you're a high schooler, but because that's how we know we did not use accounting language that you didn't understand. That's how we know that you can make a decision after us talking about it. Also, you need to have some concept that your provider will wave a red flag if the deal is just hot, stinking garbage. But would they actually know? And then furthermore, let me push you a little bit, because this is capitalism, right? If I'm a provider that's nefarious, and I know the deal stinks, but if the deal stinks, you're going to want to pay me less because it's dead deal fees. Don't I have an incentive to not tell you? Not even going into this contingency QE crap where it's even worse, because then the people really don't have any incentive to tell you anything because they just want to get their check. So when you don't have decision support, you get an analysis done that doesn't enable a decision. And I can't tell you how many people have called me after they've gotten the quality of earnings from whoever other choice is out there. And they ask me things like, hey, my bank still has questions, but I paid for the report, but the accountant's not answering them or saying they can't be answered. Like, what do I do? Tough spot to be in. I can't hop in on top of their analysis and then answer the question based on 6 weeks of analysis I didn't do. You picked the wrong person. That person should have realized that the report was meant to make a decision. That decision is both yours and the bank's. They can't answer the bank's question. You should question, what did I pay you for? The other thing that happens is you get into scenarios where I'll get a call and somebody will say, hey, look, Elliott, they got into the situation where the data was kind of messy and they couldn't get what they needed. And so there's like a whole section of the quality of earnings that they say was just impossible to do. Impossible? No. It was painful. It wasn't in their general typical scope of work. They did not want to do it. It created some risk for an accountant who's typically a risk-averse person, or they had other ways to make money that were better than finishing your report. And so they told you that they couldn't get it done. Once again, those phone calls pain me, but I can't do anything about them. So when I tell you there's 3 things about a quality of earnings that allow it to be a successful one that won't cost you $1 million, this is why I'm talking about all these things, because you need to start asking your providers, Hey, how do you get data from sellers that are going to be slow? You need to ask your provider, hey, how do you trust just QuickBooks and taxes? It sounds like a game of Russian roulette, or you're just doing work so I can pay you, but you're actually not doing the work that's sufficient for me to make a decision. And then third, once you get done with this report that I'm not an accountant and won't understand, how are you going to help me with the reason I'm here, which is making a decision on $1 million deal? You need to be asking your providers these questions because the solution for you is one that will help you make the decision in the end. But if you don't nail all three of these, you are destined for $1 million loss. And the worst place you want to be is holding a $20,000 report that you paid for, that delayed your deal 8 weeks and you took the pain on that, that didn't help you make a decision. And now you actually paid for the appropriate report title to protect yourself, and you still lost $1 million because you got it from the wrong person or the wrong scope. Email me and ask me those 3 questions, and email 2 other providers and ask them those questions and see what comes back. Don't be foolish. Don't lose $1 million. Get this decision right.